Good evening, everyone. We'll bring the city council work meeting to order. Is there a motion on tonight's agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
Is there a second? Motion made, second, discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? That motion passes. Tonight, for a portion of our work meeting, it's a joint work meeting with the Planning Commission. As such, if the chair of the Planning Commission can bring your portion of the meeting to order.
At this time, I'll call the East Bethel Planning Commission to order. Is there a motion for the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. So moved.
All right, so for the joint, for a portion of the meeting of our joint meeting, item 5A is the Stone Group Development. Stephanie.
Yeah, so November 23rd of 2021, there was a public hearing that was held at the Planning Commission to discuss the concept plan known as Stone Group Second Edition. The plan consisted of a mix of residential and commercial lots. Up on the screen, you have what they had turned in. So on the east side was the commercial component, and on the west side of it was two larger lots as a residential component. The commission more so discussed the ghost platting of the residential lots and had concerns with the future density when sewer and water would be available to it. They didn't have much concerns as how it was proposed as the concept plan. So this went to City Council on December 23rd of 2021, and Council discussed it. And Council discussed the following. They had some concerns regarding it. They had concerns regarding the preservation of the land for development when sewer and water is available to the property. And 2-acre minimums is a departure of why the land is preserved. Concerns with the plat not meeting the intent of the long-range planning goals and the 2040 comp plan. Concerns with the lot sizes and the numerous variances needed to approve the plan, and concerns of setting precedents, especially for the land to the north. So the property is located within the 2040 Metropolitan Service Area boundary, which we call the MUSA. According to the long-range planning goals, the property is located within the general commercial land use, and it is to be preserved for commercial uses. Examples of uses allowed in this area, according to our zoning code, would be things such as restaurants, grocers, gas stations, medical clinics, hotels, and retail stores, such as auto parts stores, just an example. Typically, this type of location is not suited for larger strip malls or larger anchor stores. So City Council voiced concerns about lot sizes and the long-range planning of the property. Staff had discussions with the Metropolitan Council regarding the smaller lot sizes with sewer and water versus smaller lot sizes within the septic area. Within this specific area in East Bethel, I'm talking about this particular property, the Met Council determined that 2-acre minimums for commercial properties is acceptable and does meet the long-range planning goals for East Bethel. The majority of commercial uses in this area will require at a minimum of 2 acres in size with or 2 acres in size without sewer and water. So what staff did is we researched some common commercial uses that may want to locate to this particular area. And again, these are uses that would be allowed in this area. In your packet, it's attachment 6. It's a spreadsheet of various existing businesses located within East Bethel, Blaine, Anoka, and Isani that are connected to sewer, water, city sewer and water. Lots range from 1.63 acres to 4 acres in size. So I was just going to give you some examples. So the new Quick Trip site in East Bethel, which will have city sewer and water, that is 2.6 acres in size, and it has regional stormwater ponding. And what I mean by regional stormwater ponding is that the stormwater runoff from the site will be directed and treated off-site, so it won't be on their site. There's a regional pond where all the development that happens in that area will run off into this specific area. Another example is the newly constructed Isanti Liquor Store. That's 2.6 acres with on-site stormwater ponding. And then I have some examples where we have aerials of the properties too. We have the Best Western Hotel, which is in Blaine. This is a 2-acre site, and this does have regional ponding, so they don't have ponding on their site. And again, all of these examples, they do have city sewer and water. Then there's the McDonald's in Blaine as well. This is a 2-acre site with regional ponding. And this is Aldi, that is in Blaine as well. This is a 1.84 acre site. Now this building, it was an existing building where Aldi came into it, so there's another use in the building as well, but the area that occupies Aldi is 1.84 acres. In Northern Tool, 3.22 acres, and they have regional ponding as well. And Blaine also has a kids pediatric dentistry, which is 3.36 acres in size. And again, regional ponding here. And Well Auto Supply in Blaine is just a smaller site, 1.66 acres. And we have Culver's in Blaine. This is a very small site, 1.62 acres. And then Walgreens Pharmacy, which is in Anoka, and this one is 2.44 acres, and they have ponding on their site. So I just wanted to show some examples of what lot sizes are with existing businesses that do have sewer and water. So Stone Group concept plan, their commercial lots are proposed at, there's one that was proposed at 2.04 acres, and then there was 4 lots that were at 3 acres. The proposed lot sizes are sufficient to construct commercial uses that will occupy the area with or without city sewer and water services, as shown with the examples. And then just a little bit of a background. So Johnson Street's the property that, or the street that all the properties would be accessed from. Johnson Street was constructed by the city of East Bethel in 2003-2004, in which the land was assessed the cost of the road. So according to Stone Group, counting time value of money, the banker Stone Group's investment in the road could easily exceeds $500,000. The existing alignment of the road may or may not be in the ideal location. However, it is what it is. It's existing. It is in that location, and they do plan to leave the road in that location. So with that in mind, lot layout won't change, so they don't have many other options with lots. And as part of the concept plan discussions, again, there were concerns of setting precedents and the number of variances involved, and there were many, many variances that would have to be involved if it came through as a normal plat. However, there are tools the city does use when it comes to land use planning, and one of them is planned unit developments, or PUDs, which the city of East Bethel has been using. And part of your report, I did put in there the section 56 planned unit development from our zoning code. So PUD provisions are intended to promote the efficient use of the land and promote cost-effective public and private infrastructure systems. PUDs also need to officiate the policies and standards of the comprehensive plan, which means the PUD must be consistent with a comprehensive plan. In this instance, the proposed concept plan lot sizes of 3 acres does meet the criteria needed for commercial uses, again, with or without sewer and water. If it was to be split off in these 3-acre lots without sewer and water, or if we had municipal services there. Thus, this does meet the long-range planning goals established by the city and approved by the Metropolitan Council. And again, each PUD is unique, so city council must justify the development of the proposed use that has exceptions to city ordinances, policies, or regulations. So approving one PUD for a plat does not justify the approval of another plat as a PUD. Each property, again, is unique, each PUD is unique, not in only terms of topography, layout, natural resources, etc. Each property needs to be analyzed as to what's the best use of the property. So what type of commercial is going there, industrial, residential, other things that need to be considered when looking at these PUDs, traffic flows, street access, and also what types of uses does a market analysis support in that particular area. PUD, again, is not a one-size-fits-all. It is a tool to be used to be creative and allow flexibility in planning, so city council can explore different options for each property. At this time, staff recommends discussion with Planning Commission and City Council. Points of discussion is to consider, does the concept plan meet the long-range planning goals of the comprehensive plan? Is this particular property a unique situation and unique enough to have a planned unit development? What is the vision of the commercial uses for this particular area, taking into account location, access, and traffic circulation and surrounding land uses? So what is the commission and city council's vision for commercial uses? If the plan is to move forward, would on-site private or a regional stormwater pond be better suited for this site? That makes a big difference, water drainage. And then also when the city sewer and water becomes available to the site, will hookup be required, and what will be the financial obligation for the commercial businesses? Something that needs to be considered when discussing this. If so, the appropriate legal documents are always executed and filed with the property. Legal documents are always completed by city attorney and approved by city council, so something to keep in mind as well. So at this time, staff's requesting the council and planning commission to discuss the potential of developing the land owned by Stone Group and provide staff with direction to provide to the landowner developer Stone Group.
Okay, thoughts? Question first, Stephanie, I think it's implied by your report, but not explicit. With the PUD approach, we avoid having to deal with variances in all these lots.
That's correct. Yes.
Is there a limit to how to ask this? There's flexibility. PUD gives us flexibility or limits to the flexibility. Which are things we can't deviate from.
There isn't. PUD is flexible enough where, city council gets to determine what's appropriate in it and what fits the best in that PUD.
Okay, I just want to make sure we all had a base understanding there, so.
So has there been a market analysis done of what businesses could go in, would fit best in this area?
When I was here years and years ago, there was a market analysis done, and I'm not sure when the last one was, if there was one completed more recently.
I'm not aware of one unless the owners have done that type of study.
As a city, we did one, that was a very long time ago.
It was a very long time ago.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't be relative right now anyways.
No.
Because everything's
No.
changed.
Well, generally, even if we were to do a market analysis, developers are going to do their own market analysis anyway.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
And
so.
I was just wondering if anybody knew what kind of businesses they're thinking of putting in there.
I don't recall what we actually based any decisions upon when we did the market analysis. It was pretty general back then.
It was.
Because that was like, I want to say almost 12 years ago, maybe longer. So.
Yeah, I was here, and it was mostly just our traffic studies and what type of businesses we could generate, just with the
Yeah.
traffic alone. Yeah, but this property, the land use is commercial there right now, and our zoning is B3. So it can be any type of use from an office building to fast food place to retail. We have pretty much any use in there except for industrial.
So maybe walk us through a little bit of what a PUD for this would look like. I think specifically, does the PUD just set up the lot layout? Or does it get into the detail in terms of what specific types of uses, maybe for each lot?
Yeah, so that's at the discretion of city council. You know, with a PUD, I've seen them where they have done types of uses. A lot of times they will also tie in maybe architectural standards or more landscaping or anything like that, just very flexible on, you know, working with the developer and council on what would best fit that area.
Have we done any PUDs specifically yet?
We've done the residential for Viking Preserve, and then Elevage is a PUD.
Oh, okay.
So when we come in for the next phase of Elevage, that will be when council sits down and we go through what's going to be required in that PUD.
Okay.
A lot of times it's a developer proposing what they want in it and bringing to council and discussing it.
I'd
Which kind of
imagine.
almost makes more sense.
Yeah.
This
What do we
is too
know?
hard. What do, we don't, you know, we don't know what the developer has in mind except 3-acre lots.
Do you know
And
what they have in mind beyond that? Perhaps anything beyond just flat?
Not at this time.
So I think what the kind of the stumbling block on this is the fact that this is in our future growth area. It's the first time we've had any specific proposal, I think, within the growth area. And the fact that our comp plan is set up to protect this land. Maybe protect's the wrong word. It's just to make sure it gets developed in the way that the comp plan intended. It's not a typical development area. So, and the fact that there's no services going through here, and that's why it's preserved. And so, I think that's what's, and I don't think there's anything, it's not insurmountable here. It's just finding the right way to deal with this, because we're going to have more of these going forward. And well, I think, you know, with what Stephanie's talked about the PUD, I think we're not quite as concerned about the precedent, but along those lines, I think we need to try to develop how we want to handle these in the future. And so by means of this being the first one, yeah, sure, it's kind of a precedent how to handle it, so, yeah. But I think knowing enough about all these areas along 65, you know, they're all the same, but at the same time, everything's a little different too, so. So how do folks feel about using that PUD option to deal with matters like this?
Well, it gets rid of all the variances. That's what I didn't like, all the variances that would have been needed to do it
Right.
otherwise.
Very true.
I absolutely agree. I think if we can avoid the variances by doing a PUD, I'm like, let's go for it. And I kind of like that layout. So I have a question. If a business wanted to build something that would use 2 of those, could they? Or would they be restricted to just one? If a business wanted a medical building and they needed 2 spaces so they'd have enough parking and stuff.
They could technically do that. Mhm.
Okay.
you know, some of the concerns we talked about we're setting a hodgepodge of different things on these 6 lots. You know, you could have anything from a fast food restaurant to a tire place. I mean, you know, it could be a hodgepodge of anything. And that's all frontage. In my mind, that's all frontage on 65. So, you kind of, and maybe we don't, but I would kind of like to see some pretty stringent architectural landscape, some things like that in there, because it is what people see.
Uniformity.
Yeah, uniform,
Consistent.
something to that effect in there. We kind of set some of it because Dollar General sits on that corner, but, you know,
But yet we push some higher.
we pushed some higher standards for
architectural
Dollar
standards
General when
because
we
of
did
that,
that. Yeah,
Because of that, so.
exactly. The B22 lot's the only one that really isn't seen from 65. The other ones are all seen from 65.
Well, and to go back to Steve's point, to answer your question, I know from my standpoint, I don't know about any of my fellow commission members, I like the idea of the PUD. It definitely seems to fit the characteristics, and then even just bringing in B2 because that you bring up, and I think we can set the standards for each individual lot. So if B2 was tucked back, or, you know, we set certain standards for highway frontage versus not, we could isolate that lot if it needs to be something different or a combination.
Because that's gonna be the next growth corner. I mean, that whole area there is gonna be the next big growth area. You really wanna set it.
Backs of the buildings facing the highway then, right? I mean, if they're.
It'll be the back, I would assume it'd be the backs of the building facing the highway and, you know, the parking on Johnson Street. It'd have to be, because there's no access.
Well, it's
One
not-
thing, the
Not
PUD,
necessarily though. I mean, you look at like, look in Blaine, and I think Goodwill is one example where they have a lot like this, where normally the back of the building would face Highway 65, but they put the front of the
They
building on
put their
60.
parking,
Yeah, they put their parking on the other side, so I think it's doable.
Actually, the dollar store does too.
yeah, they both
Right.
do right there by that Kentucky Fried
Yeah,
Chicken
that's
and
like
the
that too,
medical
yeah.
center.
and one thing the PUD does, it enables us to do these architectural standards, to do the four-sided architecture. You know, we have a lot of buildings where they dress the front up and then the sides and the back are not
Yeah.
treated as well as that. So we can certainly enact that kind of standard with the PUD.
Well, a question, I guess I'll ask it, you know, to Wanda's comment in a way is, in the PUD process, how far does this go? Does it go in terms of the city's control and how it's developed? Is it to the point where it's platted and then businesses come in like a normal site plan review? Or as part of the PUD, does the city have a little more control, whether it be architectural layout or anything on a PUD?
Yep, city does have much more control on that, depending on what's agreed upon with the PUD. And each one of these would still come in as a site plan as well,
Okay.
But they'd be based off the PUD then,
off the PUD standards, yep.
yes.
So would the best idea be for the developer, which I see around, but for them to come back with ideas of who's possibly going to be in there, and the PUD gets written up from what they need?
Could be, yes, yep. My recommendation would be for the developer to come in and propose something for their PUD.
For each of the 5 lots?
Before
more,
moving. Mhm.
Before moving forward?
Yep, so for the uses, all the uses that I gave examples of, this is zoned B3 and all those type of uses are allowed here.
Mhm.
So we have a list of what can go there. And I'm not sure if we can limit that within a PUD. Cause their zoning code does allow it.
So in the PUD, you just said anything that's in the B3 district,
Mhm.
there's a lot fuller than that, just covers
Right.
that blanket statement.
Correct.
But you can still have some say in if well, they'd never go in because there's no sewer and water yet. But if a McDonald's was to go in, they have 100 different architectural designs you could, and 100 different signs and.
Another good example is one I think of is, Lexington, just before you get to 35, where they now have, granted, it's like a Starbucks, Jersey Mike's and that, but that's another, something you might not think on a property like this, where they're gonna quarter turn it, and the side of the building where the cars are around is, still their face, but they're utilizing more of the.
Well, and depending on what goes in those lots, then the traffic on 209th coming out starts to become an issue.
Yeah, right, yeah, 'cause right now it's right in.
Right now, it's to Dollar Tree and Pat's.
And that's something as part of the process is we are required to send this to MnDOT. So anytime any development is on the highway or county road, we have to get approval by those entities as well. And sometimes they do require acceleration lanes and turn lanes and, but that's at the discretion of them.
We have the PUD codified now, right? I mean,
Yes, yep.
so
we do.
we don't have to develop anything, we've got, that's all in
Yes.
place, okay. Okay, what are the drawbacks? Everything we've talked about is positive, what are the drawbacks of doing this?
We'd be setting PUDs for everybody who wants to buy
Setting up for
30 acres of property,
Well,
individual.
within within the growth areas, yeah, I mean, that's kind of,
Well, and that's where all our property that's available is.
Possibly, but that may not be a bad thing though either because people can come in and just do a straight standard subdivision or when you do a PUD, typically there's a little bit more control with a PUD through the city council. And this way, city council has the option, or taking a look at it and deciding, is this the best use for this property? Is this the type of uses that we would like to see in this area?
So what happens if 5 years Dollar Tree decides they don't want to be there?
Dollar General.
Or Dollar General, what happens with the PUD on that particular, well, that's not covered under the PUD, but what would happen if 5 years, some of these tenants, owners, whatever they happen to be, decide they're leaving?
Yep, and they can leave, it just, the next business has to fit into our zoning district. Within,
Does it have to follow the PUD as
Yes.
we write it?
yes,
To be attached to the property.
it is, yes.
That's what I was trying
So
to say.
Yes.
so if there's a building facelift, it's still gonna have to conform to what the PUD is
Yeah.
already set
Mhm.
for, but they would know that going in before buying it too,
Yeah, so
You
the
would hope.
PUD is filed with the
if they're making.
county for each property.
So, another question is, if city sewer and water was in the street here, how would this be developed? How would it look? Would it be any different than the larger acreage lots?
I think Stephanie showed that the lots are about right for what fits.
Yeah, but I'm just asking,
Or would it
Is
be
there
one
something else?
large entity that would go in there with sewer and water,
Yeah,
a
what-
grocery store, a Quick Trip,
I don't think you'd have a large entity. I don't think the lot layout allows that. And you normally see the higher density commercial projects associated with that big anchor store now. Strip malls, which were once the fad and the rave, are no longer really enticing to developers. I think that's the only way you would get the high density commercial development here on this property would be with a strip mall. I think you'd see that more in the bigger 40-acre chunks that may be developed with a grocery store or some larger anchor store. They would have some outlets for strip malls. Just a quick example is County Market in St. Francis. They've got 6 or 8 little stores adjacent to that, the strip mall, and they've got the other side where they got Beef O'Brady's, another restaurant, gym, and Dairy Queen. But I think that's where you're gonna see that the strip malls are gonna be associated with the larger stores, which are gonna require the larger acreages.
So, I think to your question, Brian, what Stephanie's shown at the beginning here is that a lot of these uses, these lots fit into the size of their needs.
Yes.
I think to ask your question a different way is, and that's what my concerns were before, is in terms of use of the utility services, it's not how many lots, it's how many ERUs we have with each lot. So it's the use, and that comes back to, I think, with the PUDs, making sure, like, you know, a self-storage facility, another one. Obviously, there's no employees, there's no use. That is one ERU as opposed to a restaurant, which is going to be many more. And I think that's where my concern was not so much opposed to the plan, is how that plan fits in with the overall plan, because with the way the utility services were designed, it was designed on estimating how many ERUs would be there when the city's fully developed. And so the concern was, are we shortchanging ourselves by allowing a use in there for an area that had, I don't know, 40 ERUs, whatever. You know, and we change it to only have 5. What have we done to this whole system balance in terms of financing the system? So, in the way everything's been presented, there's no real way to look at that or to evaluate that. And I think that's something that we need to work into the process. And you know, it's not doing a study. It's basically checking on what we have planned, and does it fit within, you know, Met Council may say it fits within their plan. That, I'm sure they look into that detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think if we do that, it's whole part of our just process of considering developments in these areas.
And that could be part of the process of the evaluation of the approval of the PUD.
Right.
You know,
I
if you,
was just gonna ask, within the PUD, can we have a minimum ERU requirement? That you're required to have at least, I don't know, 10 ERUs.
Well, that's kind of
Yeah.
along the lines of the uses, right?
yeah,
We
Yes,
kind
it
of know
does.
what a
Yeah.
medical office would be, or a gas station with a car wash, things like that. But
And a
that's-
lot of
that's
those are
one approach, too.
limited, a lot of those are limited to the fact that they have to have sewer and water.
Well, this is all
Yeah.
based on sewer and
Yeah.
water. So that's the next question we're gonna talk about, but in terms of evaluating in the PUD process, what's coming in.
and that wouldn't be a problem. All you gotta do is submit the footprint of the building, the floor plan, and the Met Council will give you the SAC determination for that particular use.
Right, and I think we have all these properties on a table somewhere in terms of how we came up with the calculations.
Yeah, there was that done back in 2009 or 2010.
Yeah, so, but some way to
Yeah.
measure that, you know, whatever way it is.
And again, I'm not sure if it was by lot or by growth area. It's probably by growth area, so that gives you some flexibility.
Yeah.
You know, you may have one that has 3, but the next one may have 12, so.
And that was very broad and rough in terms
Yes.
of that too, so it wasn't anything in detail.
Yeah, so staff will look into that. I remember seeing that plan.
So, okay. So, on the subject of hookup, to me, it's not really a question, because this area is meant to be commercial for utility services. So for me, it's, you know, these would have to be hooked up in this area, you know, when those services are provided, whenever that is. How you do that is, I think, another.
That's in our ordinance too, that service to commercial properties are mandatorily required to connect.
So it is by ordinance.
Yes.
So there is nothing, so we don't have to debate that.
Easy answer.
But I would also go to the extent that, you know, when whatever lots, however they're laid out, when they're developed, that those utility pipes are actually put in the ground to the curb. So they're there. For 2 reasons. One, it helps to make sure it does get connected, but 2, long-term, you know, you're gonna pay 4 or 5 times as much to put that pipe in later on than you are during site development, so.
I don't think we required that for Dollar General.
No, we didn't require them to stub that out, but, you know, theirs is such a short
There's a
run
short one.
anyway. If these properties are closer to 65, they may be 150 setback from the street. So, you know, as to Steve's point, that may be, you're gonna be digging up things that have already been put in, parking lots, landscaping, underground utilities, things of that nature. Dollar General's would be a simple one to hook up because it's so close to 209th.
Yeah, I think what you don't wanna happen is, you know, example here, if the building's put in the middle and the septic's put on the east side, on the highway side, well, all the plumbing's going to the east when utilities come in and it's along Johnson Street. Now all the pipes gotta go under the building and get out to Johnson Street, so it's easy to design, it's easy to put pipe in the ground when there's nothing in the way, so. But I think that's something that we should consider too. It's a little more development cost, but I think in the long run it gets rid of a lot of headaches, so.
Well, that's the business side. What about the residential side? That's where the planning commission had a few more concerns.
Yep, so the residential side, how it is right now, it's if there was no sewer and water there. But what the developer was proposing and staff had agreed with them is to do a ghost plat on how it could be developed if sewer and water was there. And if you remember, it was a cul-de-sac going in on each of them
Each
and
of 'em.
maybe 6 lots. But even those 6 lots that they proposed were 1 acre in size or larger, which is a lot larger than what is required by code when sewer and water's available. So technically, if they didn't have those wetlands, they could have went down to 1/4 acre lots. So density residential wise, with sewer and water, how they propose it is still a lot less than what it could be.
Which again goes back to the question of, is it gonna meet what our expectations were for these areas? You said it could support a lot more, so.
Yep.
you know,
But because of the constraints of the property though, with the wetlands, they're limited as
Oh,
well.
I agree, I mean, there's gonna be constraints.
Yeah.
But is it meeting the intent of the plan for that area? I think, again, it's just part of that
Mm-hmm.
Because one of
analysis
those
for
was
PUD.
medium density, wasn't it?
Yeah, they
R2
were
or
two
the-
different zones, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, R2, which it doesn't have to be. So how the way that Met Council looked at it is it could be just the single family regular urban, but they can go up to townhomes if they wanted to.
So to me, this is a whole different set of challenges
The
because,
residential area.
because, you know, it's one thing to have these 2 acre lots, which technically can support septic. And then when services come in, services are connected, but they can't operate on septic in the meantime. The residential can't. If you go on a 1/4 acre lots, you can't get septics. It's just impractical to do stuff.
Yeah, and I think that the PUD would more than likely just be on the commercial property, and the residential would still stay as how they have it proposed now. At the, almost, I think they're both 10 acres.
They're outlots right now, though, isn't it? They're not.
It is right now, but yeah, if they were
Right.
to split it into the 2 residential lots. Our big thing is when they came in with the concept plan, we were thinking of, okay, if they're approved with these 10-acre splits, how they have it right now, is we wanted them to be thinking about if sewer and water is to come in, do we require them to put a house in a certain spot so we can be guaranteed that those lots can be split in the future when sewer and water is available? You know, rather than somebody just taking a house and just putting it wherever in all their outbuildings, and then later on down the road, the lots can't be split because of all the existing structures.
And then that gets into deeper questions of how do you facilitate the future development of that ghost plat? Who owns all
Right.
that land?
Right.
Is it the one home that bought it?
And that's what it'd be, yeah.
would be interesting. I'm not sure how that would play out, but.
Mhm.
So we were discussing something, I don't think I was a part of the committee at this point, but cul-de-sacs, once they reach a certain length, they're not supposed to be cul-de-sacs, you have to have one in, one out.
Mhm.
Is that going to apply here? Because you, like you were pointing out, they've got a cul-de-sac heading south and north, and there's no residences on the west side
Are you
yet.
talking about the two
Yep, yep.
proposed on the west side?
Or
Yeah,
Johnson
yep.
Street, oh.
So,
Yeah,
so.
Johnson Street's already there, that cul-de-sac's already there.
Right, so what I'm saying is, once all of this starts to get developed, is that gonna be required, you know, kind of to Wanda's point, is this area 209th starts to blow up and get bigger, and you're, okay, now we need a stoplight, whatever it's gonna be, however big it gets. This street here, Johnson, is assumably gonna have to continue, because it's, I'm guessing it's longer than 500 feet.
Yeah,
Uh,
and we,
It,
go ahead.
yeah, it would, that street is planned to continue at least on down to 205th, where it would then, in all likelihood, have an entrance to Highway 65 on the north side of you, Puller Auto Parts, where Hunter's Inn used to be. Eventually, it's planned to go on down to connect to Viking Boulevard. When that happens is yet to be seen, but there is property there to the south that is attractive and developable. And I think that that street extension will occur. The same way to the north, there's a cul-de-sac on the north here, and that street is planned to connect to Sims Road. And that development will occur probably sooner than the one to the south, as far as that extension goes. And while we do have in our ordinance that cul-de-sacs can be no longer than 500 feet in length, due to the nature of many of the properties in East Bethel, there have been lots of variances given, and a 500-foot cul-de-sac is usually the exception rather than the rule. But it's based on the fact that, you know, there's no way to get a secondary route out there.
And a cul-de-sac like this one would be allowed now because the cul-de-sac at the end's actually temporary until the next segment of road's built.
And as you can see, and if you go out there, this cul-de-sac actually abuts up to the property line, and it was designed that way so it can be further extended without any additional right-of-way having to be acquired.
And for whatever reason, that north side doesn't have a cul-de-sac. It-
I know.
It
There's
just
there's no wings on it, so
Just ends.
I don't know why that happened that way.
I
but-
think it was the way the right-of-way was acquired on that,
Oh, it could be.
because there was a
Yeah, we don't need to go into that again.
In looking at the residential portion of this particular planned unit development, and looking forward to setting the precedent that we are going to be having other planned unit developments because of this particular issue. Would it make sense for us just to not allow this to be a residential and make all the properties here to be, you know, business, B3? Because then you're not gonna have a resident property in, you know, the zone of the 65 corridor. And that would set the precedent for any future PUDs that, you know, it has to be a business use unless you're going to split it up as a residential water treatment or water, you know, services to be had in that particular area. Because it seems to me that you're trying to split hairs as to what to do with these residential properties. I don't see how you can just kind of, unless you're gonna, you know, do the split now as to what it's gonna be when the sewer is there. And then my other thought is, you know, if you are gonna plan this for sewer and water, that any planned unit development should include that the future is whether residential or, you know, business, that it should be hooked up to sewer and water, that it should be included.
Well, I think that's, you know, in this scenario, the road's already there. You know, if we were in a situation where the road's not there and it's gonna be constructed as part of it, you know, then I think that changes things in how we deal with it. It could still be built and all the utilities put in, it's just not hooked up, that's a potential too. But back to your residential, I mean, I think there's a lot of concerns. I think it's very problematic to do this type of approach with the residential, just because the lot size is more complicated and there's less control. So in this case, these are actually, it's still an outlot, right?
It is,
Yeah.
yes.
And these two I can't read the numbers, they're less than 10 acres each,
Yeah,
right?
Just
Yeah.
a small, just a smidgen smaller than 10 acres.
One's 7
One
3/4
was-
and the other's just under
Yeah, just under 10.
9.6.
Well, it's not a smidgen, it's.
But the 9.6.
It's 16, not 20, so
Yeah.
it's a so technically, they can only put one lot in there anyway if they wanted to. And that's one way to control it. Or we just leave it as an outlot until some future time. I mean, that's an option too.
Yep. Now, I do know the residents to the west, I can't remember the name of the development, is it Hidden Haven?
Didn't have, yeah.
Yeah, they have been to all of these meetings, and they do continue to answer the question, ensuring that that is going to be residential on that side of the street abutting their properties. And I do, because they don't want commercial uses abutting their properties. And I do remember during the 2008 comp plan, when we did that, the reason why we did that, I think it's R2 zoning, if I remember correctly, on there.
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
It was because we wanted a buffer,
A buffer.
you know, between the residential and the commercial businesses, so.
So I think that's to your question about whether we just treat it all as commercial. The way this property was set up was set up this way to create that buffer to that neighborhood, so. Because I remember there was a lot of discussion from that
There
neighborhood
was.
about this, so.
Well, it's Hidden Haven.
Well, and I mean, you look, there's
There's
8
some
houses.
really nice
that butt-
houses,
That
yeah.
butt up to that property, so.
And there's not really any kind of natural buffer there.
Actually, on the north side, a berm was put in along the road there to create some more buffer on the north one. Okay.
Can I make another comment? Curious, say for instance, this area starts to get developed with the businesses all here on the west side of Johnson Street, and, you know, that just continues north, because that's the plan. You've got other developers asking pretty much the same question from what I understand. So if that just gets filled in, say business is booming and people just start coming in, and residences are then on the east side, this is just a general question. Say for instance, we want to put a park there. You know, you've got all these houses, and I'm looking on the Google Maps here, and I don't, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see anything, any playground, you know, there's a golf course there, but I think of Coon Rapids, Riverdale area, they've got quite a busy shopping center there, and then in the heart of it, kind of tucked around behind a pond in that Buffalo Wild Wings area, they've got a playground. And I don't know how much, you know, if I feel like something like that might break up the whole field of business, residential. So the question, I suppose, being, what would we have to do, you as, you know, the city council do to say, hey, this piece of property is ours, we want to do something with this other than just let a developer sell it to a homeowner who just wants to put a house with 6 outbuildings or another Dollar General a block away, whatever.
Yeah, so every time a plat comes in, Gabe, it goes to the Parks Commission, and so the Parks Commission always takes a look at what our Parks Plan says, and they make a determination if they feel a good fit would be a park in the area or not, and then that recommendation goes to City Council. Now, in instances like this, though, it's a planned unit development. Let's say going to the north, it was a planned unit development. Again, then Planning Commission, City Council are looking at it, and they're making suggestions or requirements of a developer. And, you know, council at that time might say, the park looks good here, this is what we want to see, and make it a requirement.
The other option would be just if the city were to buy those lots
Mm-hmm.
and either put in a park or hold on to it until you want to separate it into residential lots. I'm not recommending that, I'm just saying that
It's an option.
that's an option.
Well, and that's like, I mean, you look at that medium density residential, that could potentially something that the city says, well, one of those lots needs to be a park.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you know, Parks Commission, the city looks at where our parks around the city, how they served. A park becomes, you know, basically a liability for the city because we have to maintain it. The Elevage development, for example, they've got kind of a park area developed, planned into their development. I don't think it's gonna be a city park, but it's part of that development, so everything's.
It's a private.
Required, that you requested of them to make that a part of their.
When a residential development comes in, as Stephanie mentioned, we either take land or we take a value. And then that money, it's basically in lieu of a park dedication fee. And that goes into the funding mechanism to fund all our parks, whether it's replacement of materials or operations or whatnot, so. So it's a decision. So we have 19 parks right now. Yeah, and it's a challenge to maintain 19 parks, so.
And it is known that there are not as many up north
Yeah.
as there are
And
in
if you,
this area.
Gabriel, if you look at this shot right here, this is the area that's proposed to be developed right across the road here. And I know it's not adjacent, it wouldn't be a little neighborhood park, but the city owns 14 acres here, just north of the ice arena, that could be considered to be developed into some sort of a bigger regional park or campus facility for the city at some point. So a lot of these smaller neighborhoods, like Steve mentioned, these little neighborhood parks are very difficult to maintain. We've got probably too many of them now. And when you have some of these acreages here, we're looking at more trying to concentrate these things in more strategically located regional facilities where it'll have more amenities.
Now, it's not to say, you know, on the southern portion of the city where we're having more of the urban growth lots, that's somewhere where you're probably gonna possibly see more parks, you know, tot lot type things with the trails and stuff for the residents, but not in the areas with the bigger lots.
Any other thoughts? Seems like we have a consensus as to how to approach this.
I do, yeah, and I will talk with the landowner and we'll move forward with it.
Okay. Anything else on this? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next item. Okay. Item 5B.
So the next one we have is a zoning code discussion for automotive repair as a home occupation. Automotive repairs is a prohibited use within all residential zoning districts right now. It's only allowed as an accessory use in the commercial districts. So let's say if we had a service station, a gas station, and they had automotive repair there, that is allowed. It's just not allowed in any residential areas. A little bit of background on it. November 8th of 21 city council meeting, there was an administrative hearing which was held in response to a code enforcement efforts regarding a resident that was running a automotive repair shop from his home occupation. On December 13th of 2021, staff sought clarification from City Council in which the council directed staff to bring the issue to Planning Commission to discuss the automotive repair as a possible home occupation. So then on January 25th of 2022, the Planning Commission held a discussion. There was limited attendance at the meeting. I think we had 4 commission members there, so there was 3 absent. And so the commission comments included, there was some support of it on larger lots. There was support of it on larger lots if they met right criteria, like setbacks to neighboring properties of the accessory structure, concerns with the outdoor storage of the vehicles, if it was taking place in the residential area. They talked about if there was a way to control the precedents, then they'd be in support of it. So again, just having some type of regulations in place, pretty tight regulations, just to make sure that there can be code enforcement and issues and such. Guidelines to the number of vehicles allowed on site at the time, being comfortable. One of them was comfortable with a maximum of 5 vehicles. There was also discussion that it should be based on each individual site coming forward to see if that site would match having having this as a home occupation. Talked about the issue of liability insurance. And overall, the commissioners supported it at the work session. However, they wanted City Council to further explore it, and that's why we're here tonight for the commission and City Council to discuss it. So according to Anoka County cities, we did a little bit of research. Andover and Blaine do not allow home occupations to occupy any accessory buildings unless specified with an approved conditional use permit, which rules out automotive repair. Anoka, Columbia Heights, Coon Rapids, Fridley, Lino Lakes, and Ramsey explicitly prohibit all automotive repair home occupations. Any Anoka County city not mentioned here does not allow the use by ordinance, as the use is not listed in their ordinances state. If a use is not listed, then it is explicitly prohibited. Points to consider during this discussion is limiting automotive repair only to commercial properties as currently allowed by city code. If automotive repair is allowed within residential districts, should it be allowed throughout the city, including urban small lots, or limited to bigger lots in the rural areas? And if it was to be allowed, what type of requirements should be imposed? So at this time, staff recommends the commission and council to discuss the automotive repair as a home occupation and provide staff with direction in terms of moving forward with a zoning text amendment.
Stephanie, can I ask a question first, a clarity? If I read your paragraph right, does it mean to say there isn't a single city in the county that allows?
According to this, Aaron did some research on it. I'm assuming some of them Oak Grove. I'm not sure how Oak Grove came back as, or Ham Lake. Because I see those aren't.
I guess I'm referring to
down.
that last sentence. I'm confused by that last sentence.
This use is not listed, their ordinances state. Yeah, it sounds like that any of the other cities, they would be prohibited.
It's prohibited, so.
Yes. Okay.
But,
Commissioner Terry does say that there is one in the city of Bethel.
Bethel, you said? Okay.
I know when this came up for discussion for us, I know for me personally, I could see this in the commercial areas. I personally couldn't see this in the residential. I think there's too many guidelines and restrictions we'd have to place on it to make it work. It's just my initial thoughts from what we were discussing. My fellow members I know had other varying opinions, so like I said then, it's not that I can't be convinced, I'm really hard pressed.
Yeah, I believe that allowing it would open up a Pandora's box of issues. It's not, could we? Yes. I believe it would take many meetings. Our time is finite. should we be discussing other meetings? Staff's time is finite, because they'd have to do a lot of research, I'm sure, and once we get something wrote up, we're gonna need tweaks over it, because it's not gonna quite work. And then our zoning enforcement people, their time is finite. Should they be addressing all this? And saying this, not all of them are bad. We have had some examples of very good ran automotive repair, which the one that brought this subject up, that was a superstar outfit. It looked nice, it didn't bother the neighborhood, it was there for 10 years without anybody knowing, and that's great. But I think they are more the exception than the rule, and that's why no other, as it reads here, no other cities in Anoka County allow it, because you're gonna get people that have X number of cars out there, do work into up till midnight or later, and it might bother neighbors, et cetera, because with home occupations, we have to remember that these are in the neighborhoods. Neighborhoods are meant for residential living and residential expectations of a certain amount of peace and quiet. And unfortunately, automotive repair is not always quiet. So, and with this as well, it's a comparison of, you have, there's a repair shop right off Sims. I won't say the name explicitly, but it's right over there, and they are in a commercial place. They put the investment in, they pay the taxes to be able to operate there, and now you have somebody that they put up their own shop and they can do their own thing, but they don't pay the same taxes, they don't have the same costs as this other automotive place in a commercial area, and that is, examples have been made that it is an unfair practice to allow something over here but not over here. And so I just think that there'd be too many issues with, it's not that we couldn't, but is our time, would our time dedicated to do this be better used as planning for a future frontage road, or planning for commercial lots or something? It's unfortunate to compare it like that, but our time is finite as well as everybody else's.
Well, I think that tax analogy would apply to absolutely any home occupation. Then why do we allow any home occupation? Because a tax accountant working out of their home versus leasing a place out of a business pays different taxes. So I think they should be allowed. The attorney said there's nothing specifically prohibited in our documents, our regulations that prohibit it as long as it meets the requirements of a home occupation, and I think it does. I think there are state guidelines that have to be, that they have probably been following in state inspections that they have to meet. So I see no reason why we can't let them continue their business. That's their lifeline. That's their bread and butter. Why would we shut that down just for some rules? It
Well, and
doesn't
I
make
don't
any
think it's a
sense.
matter of shutting it down, it's a matter of, they knew that they weren't following the rules, and they knew eventually they were gonna get caught. And I think, honestly, by the looks of it, they're probably outgrowing their space.
I don't know.
And perhaps it's just a matter of, you know, by their own admission, that they're getting bigger, and they knew eventually they were gonna have to look for something else, and maybe it's not putting them out of business as much as setting a sunset time for them to say, okay, this can be done until X, and by X, you know, they have outdoor storage. I mean, the cars are there. You know, it is fenced, but there still were cars there when I went by.
So, I mean, what you're referring to is the reason why
We're
we're brought here, but it's not the reason why we're here tonight. So I think let's stay away from the specific example, other than using it as example. But we're here to look at in generality whether we change our ordinance to allow this. And Suzanne, I think you misunderstood what was said, what the attorney said. I believe it said there's no state law that prohibits, but our ordinance prohibits this use in a residential area, correct? Is that correct, Stephanie?
The minutes say Nelson responded, no, there is nothing specifically prohibited in auto repair business as long as it met the requirements of a home occupation.
So our ordinances allow this now, or they do not?
No.
They don't.
They don't prohibit it either.
No, they
allow
do prohibit
They
it.
prohibit it.
Not according to the attorney.
And I think maybe
Well,
that's
unless it-
miswritten because I'm the one that asked the question. I remember I asked if there's a state law that prohibits, and the attorney said no. So, but anyhow, our current city, that's why we're here. Our ordinances don't allow this now. So that's why we're here considering changing ordinances to allow this. So,
So I'd like to add something to this
sure.
part of the discussion. I think Brian's point was very well taken about the fact that, you know, you do have other automotive businesses who are in the commercial district, who are at a disadvantage to someone who is just doing it out of their home. But I think it goes beyond that. I think, you know, it's not just that we should be, which we should be looking at. I think some of the other considerations that are concerning about automotive in residential neighborhoods is it's a fire hazard. I mean, working on gas-powered engines can be a risky business. I think the other thing that is a concern is the environmental concerns of someone who's changing oil and other fluids that might impact the groundwater in the residential neighborhoods, especially since we have mostly well water in these particular neighborhoods. And the other thing is that from what I've been reading, there is, I don't know if I would call it significant, but there is an increased amount of traffic going in and out of this neighborhood because of this business. And one of the things that we look at when considering, you know, whether someone should have an intermittent use permit is whether it will increase the traffic in a particular neighborhood. And I think, yes, it's true, Suzanne, that you know, an accountant, you know, could be at home rather than in the commercial district, but that does not increase the traffic going in and out generally of a neighborhood. There's no signs typically for that type of business that, you know, is in the residential neighborhood, and there's no impact of danger or environmental impacts that would happen with that. Did I hear you right? You were saying that they've been inspected by the state for what they do. I'm not so sure that's true, and maybe I just heard you wrong, but I don't think that would be true if this was someone who's just doing their business in their garage. But I could be mistaken.
I think, I mean, on your comment about traffic, I mean, I think it's something we always talk about, but, would not a hairstylist have more traffic than a, you know, an automotive place that has a few cars there once a day?
Or an accountant,
I mean, there's
could have 10 people come a day.
easy 10, 20 people a day at a stylist house. So, but again, it's part of that consideration, is that, you know, acceptable impact to the neighborhood is traffic. So that's just one of the things. I mean, there's many things, but, I just want to bring that out because, you know, a business like this, I don't see traffic going in and out all day long, you know.
I think a good point is fire and environmental.
But at the same time, I mean, where I think the risk, I mean, there's a risk there. Where I think the risk is, and I think overall, to me, why cities don't allow this, is it's not, and I said this before, it's not for, it's not for the ones that do everything right. It's not. It's the ones, we set these laws for people that don't do things right and don't bother to try to do things right. That's the biggest concern. And to me, this type of a business operation has more risk of going awry in terms of keeping, you know, in line, just because of the type of work it is. And, you know, you're dealing with cars and trucks and vehicles, and if something doesn't work, it lays around. And that's why we've had properties that we've had to get 20, 30 cars removed from, you know. I'm not saying it's where it goes, but I'm just saying, as opposed to a hairstylist or an accountant or even a machinist, you know, having that business not go the way it should be operated right has a less effect on the neighborhood that is opposed to someone who's doing automotive and has the risk of, it does happen, you know, people dumping oil behind the barn, stuff like that. It you know, it has that risk just because that's the type of business, you know. I remember many years ago, we had a plater, a guy, I think it was someone doing plating for guns or something. And they were dealing with some serious chemicals, you know, and they wanted to make sure they did everything right. They brought the county in to make sure they're managing it right. And we had a lot of serious look at it because it's in a neighborhood. They didn't have any customers, but because of the type of materials they're handling. So it was a higher risk than an accountant, right? So, but that's what we weighed. And that's why I'm sensing why no one allows these other than one community. Is they all have history, as we do, with these types, so.
I wanted to address a couple of the things that were brought up. One is, because the issues should be legitimate issues that would make us either prohibit or allow, but some of them are kind of less tangible, like the advantage of over a commercial. It also works the other way. A commercial business has visibility, has a location and a way to advertise that is different because you're not allowed the signage in a residential. So it's more word of mouth than a business that's visible and has a commercial appeal. So I don't see that as, you know, just strictly on the advantage side just because they're not paying the taxes. The other fire hazard, theoretically, yes, but I can't think of an example that makes it seem like it's a big risk in terms of you read about fires that happen at this or that automotive residential. I mean, it's like, where's there evidence of that has actually been a problem? Because people, it's their home and their business, you'd think they'd be extra careful to want to protect that. And then the other thing in terms of, there's a legitimate concern about spillage or leaks, oil, et cetera. But if the requirements are that all this has to happen, including parking on an impermeable surface, then there's a way to contain that so it doesn't seep into the groundwater if there are leaks. So that could just be part of the requirement. A number of these things may be addressed by having requirements like noise. to me, that would be one of the biggest ones that disrupts the residential setting to have, things going on at the wrong hours, or if you can have that in an enclosed space where the noise is contained, then that would be a different issue than you have it in the building, but the garage doors are open in the summer and the noise is getting out into the neighborhood. And that's also where setbacks, where a larger property, if the thing would be set back far enough so that that wouldn't be an issue. And then that is where you look at things on an individual lot basis rather than having a blanket, like, we'll allow this, but it has to pass these particular things, and it's a case by case. I don't know if you can word that in an ordinance, but so that it's not just a blanket thing like 10 acres and you're good to go, or 5 acres or whatever it is, but each place has its own merits based on the site conditions. So, some of the
Yeah, I agree with you, Glenn. I'd like that, the bigger lots like that, I wouldn't have an issue. If somebody's got 20, 25 acres and you're out in the back, nobody sees you, take care of it. I agree with you.
Well, I think it's all part of, there's ways to make this work. Then I think the question is do we have the wherewithal to work on that, to create ordinances to do something like that? Particularly, if we're talking about based on lot sizes, I think that the instance that brought this all before us, I mean, it's a very small lot in a tight neighborhood. I don't think that fits the general discussion of what we're having of, you have a large lot, you can accommodate more because of sound and visual things. I don't think it's gonna help this case, so we really don't have anything before us that's pushing us to do something like this on larger lots, so then the question is, and I think the question still remains, is do we wanna, is this something worth working on?
But we do need to have something in place so that we have either it's good to go or it's not. But to just have it vague or not clearly defined, then it may happen down the road somewhere else.
But it is clearly defined. At this point, it is clearly defined, no.
Well, it is, and I think,
Answer whether we did or not. You had differences of opinion of whether this is allowed or not, just right here.
right.
So I don't think it's all that clear.
Well, I think I guess what I'm saying is that I'm asking the question, is it worth going through the effort right now to set this up for something that hasn't been proposed yet? And I agree, we would be ready if that did come forward for something with larger lots. I mean, we could go forward with this and define it such that we know what range we're talking about. But I think the question we need to ask ourselves is, do we want to do this at all? Do we want to change this at all?
It's above my pay grade.
And I think we've got,
Stephanie, do you have any?
that's why we brought everyone here, so.
Do you have any guesses on how many of those businesses are off the city right now?
I don't know, but I could definitely talk to Nick and Aaron, and they would probably have a pretty good guess.
You talking 20 or?
Well,
Handful,
just-
maybe?
Yeah, I mean, make an assumption, just, if we do this, expect that we'll have 10 applications and have to deal with all these 10 people, but I mean, just make that arbitrary and
And what if they don't fit in our perfect?
right, so everyone's gonna have to eat, so, I mean, it's opening a little bit of a floodgate to do this, so. And keep in mind, that's only the discussion, we're gonna have to have this as a community discussion, so we're gonna get a lot of public feedback, so.
Well, if I may, to me, I think if you're gonna open this discussion, it's not just gonna be those 10 people who may be doing this work in their garages for automotive repair. You're now also gonna get people who may have other businesses in residential that are different from automotive repair, that will say, exceptions in this case, how is that any different from me doing something in my property? So, I mean, I know that there's been examples of people who drive semi-trucks in neighborhoods. I mean, why wouldn't they wanna come forward and say, well, what's the difference of somebody running an automotive shop in my neighborhood and me just being able to just, pull in with my semi-truck and then drive it out? I mean, I'm on the road all the time.
And building contractors.
Yeah, that's,
We've had that issue in the past as well.
Mhm.
Building
Building
contractors
contractors.
who had fairly large pieces of equipment. And the question is what the impact is on the neighborhood, not necessarily whether or not the business is good or whether or not we have sympathy, for the owner and the business that they have, because we do. I mean, we would all love to be able to say, you can do whatever you want on your property, but, there's gonna come a time too where if you say, okay, this is what's good for us, we may get a reputation as a city and then end up with nothing but.
I don't think that's gonna happen with the auto repair because we're running out of places that have large enough lots. With the developments coming in and farmlands being sold, the lots are small. So the large lots that we have in East Bethel are actually likely to disappear. At some point, some of those large lots are gonna be split. Families are gonna wanna divide them. What's gonna happen then? And if we do allow this in neighborhoods, the time, it's gonna be so time consuming. Who's going to inspect these? Who's gonna make sure that everything is up to code, that the equipment is working properly, that all the licensing is, it's a nightmare.
Well, I think to Brian's point, there's a finite amount of time
Yeah,
for every person in this room, and is it something that's worth the hours upon hours at this point that it's gonna take, or is our time better spent on something that's more pressing?
Or the other question is, as far as enforcement, we have difficulty enough with the existing codes we have, and now we're talking about developing a more complicated one, which is gonna be probably very difficult to enforce and make sure it's adhered to.
I'll just say it, I don't agree. I don't think I'd like them in our neighborhoods. I don't know if we're asking for everybody, but at this point, I don't think that's what I want. I don't want them in my neighborhood, and that's how I look at it. If I don't want it in my neighborhood, then does some other person in East Bethel want it in their backyard?
If the ordinance does say that it's prohibited, I don't see any compelling reason to change it.
Well, and that's what we're here, is just to see whether it's worth changing, and I'm not hearing a whole lot of support for it, so, I mean, it's, I think there's ways it could be done, there's ways anything can be done, but, is it worth that effort, is it worth that investment? And I think particularly for this, it's worth the risks, so.
And if I can further your point with that, there's a lot of things out there in the world right now. The wheel doesn't need to be reinvented all the time, but the fact that this is a wheel that nobody's wanted to tackle, I think also says something too. And again, that goes right back to Brian's point, finite time, but energy and effort and enforcement and all the things that come with it.
If someone did have a large lot, say 20 acres, and they wanted to have this type of business on their property, isn't it within the city's rights to change the coding for that particular property to a business use in order for them to have that particular use?
That would be spot zoning, which is what we try to avoid.
I frankly think of somebody,
I don't disagree. I'm merely trying to address.
Yes, it could.
somebody had-
Yeah, but do we, that's,
and frankly, I think that if somebody had 20 acres, 40 acres, and they're doing it, no one's gonna notice anyways.
They're already doing it.
Yeah.
And as I'll say too, for your example of doing something like that, that would actually have to go to the Met Council because it would be a land use change as well. In which Met Council does not support spot zoning.
Couldn't they get conditional use permit?
No, it'd have to be in our code as a conditional use permit.
So what I don't understand is, how would all this enforcement that everybody's talking about differ for this, for a home use occupation versus somebody off of 65 who has an automotive repair business? What's the difference? I'm not getting it, because they have to have licenses, they have to follow all the state regulations. Either way, they're both doing it.
I don't think the home occupations are doing it.
They're running under the radar. They're not filing, how would anybody know until someone complains, and then they complain, and then they come out, and then.
Well,
okay,
they
now they're
said
coming
they
to the
were,
city.
though.
Well, I
We're
think,
not talking about one, we're talking in general.
yeah, I think in general, this type of business has, my opinion, would have a more opportunity for complaints, just because the type of business there is.
But if they're filed with the city, then they're known that they have to be inspected by the fire department and all these other places. So they just want to, this one company just wants to be legit. And I think if we made it so that it's possible for them to be legit, then it's just an honest business. Only they're using their property for it instead of paying a exorbitant amount of leasing fees.
But it's back to the idea that it's a commercial business within a residential neighborhood.
And,
A bit more of an intensive commercial business as well.
and here's the other rub to it. In order for us to know about it, they have to have an interim use permit. Most of these people that do automotive repair do not have IUPs. In order to have an IUP, you have to meet the home occupation requirements, which automotive repair does not meet. And we talk about traffic, it's not always the volume of traffic, it's the type of traffic that comes in. Is it wreckers, is it roll-offs, is it parts delivery trucks and things like that?
Well, there's outdoor storage, there's hours of operate, there's all
We
kinds
have
of
a hard
things.
enough time with keeping our residents with 5 vehicles on their properties. And we know for a fact that a large percentage of our home occupied businesses have never applied for anything with the city. We don't know they're there until somebody complains. That's the only way we know they're there. So in this case, it's just one that I don't think I'm comfortable opening that up.
Can I make a point real quick? Jack, are you able to pull up, page 23 of the packet? I think it's 5D attachment 1. This is part of the city's ordinance, correct? It's appendix A zoning
Can you pull that up, Stephanie?
on, well, that's beautiful.
That's not the ordinance. is it?
No. That's our beautiful daughters. What page is it on?
23.
23 is what it says at the bottom, the joint work meeting packet, page 23.
Oh, so it is in their packet?
It's in your packet.
So the only reason I'm
Wait a
bringing
minute,
it up
I
is,
have that.
for clarification, just to make the quick point, so this says it's, for administrative home occupations, and these are the requirements for giving them a permit. And if you go through the list, there's this, now for administrative, like, I'm guessing this is like a tax office or, a therapist operating out of their home. The list of requirements are pretty, strict, and I went through this the first time looking at it as though this was for automotive repair, and I'm looking at, shall not generate hazardous waste unless planned for offsite disposal. Shall be no detriments to residential character of the neighborhood due to the emission of noise, odor, smoke, dust, gas, heat, glare, vibration. Just all of these, and this is for administrative. So if you were to transfer and put that exact same requirement on a commercial place can do it, why can't we just put the same requirements on, an in-home occupation auto repair shop? I think those requirements that are put commercially would be far more strict than even what's listed here for an administrative, home occupation permit. So I think, kind of what Brian was saying is like, this whole list for the administrative would be way longer for auto repair and, a residential application. And I think it'd be very difficult to fit all of those criteria practically on a residential lot. And I'd love to say yes, but then, there are requirements that even something less invasive or intrusive, on a neighborhood.
One thing to keep in mind too is the way that our zoning code reads right now for permitted uses, even in the commercial areas. The way our code reads, you can't have just an automotive repair facility. It has to be it's an accessory use of, let's say, a gas station. We do have them out there, but they are existing uses that have been around for a long time. But according to our code, a new one wouldn't be allowed to come in on site in any of our commercial districts.
Why would that be?
I don't know, it's how our code reads. It just says that they are an accessory use to service station, motor vehicle service stations, which is a gas station.
Like Cedar Creek Automotive.
That's grandfathered
That's
in.
grandfathered in, but it wouldn't be allowed now. Why wouldn't we allow business like that now? That's crazy.
Yeah.
When was that?
Well, and that's something worth more discussion than what we're discussing now.
Every time we look, we have to fix something else.
Well, that's why my original statement was, again,
Yeah.
I'm more than open to the commercial site usage, but again, I'd be hard pressed to be
Well.
enticed to the residential side of it. As much as I would love to, again, I'm not gonna speak for everyone here, but I'm pretty sure most of us that have always been on here have always been pretty open to want to be able to help any of our residents to do what and where they can, when we can. And that's always the big asterisk when people come before us, and whether it's staff or city council or planning, and it's not an easy thing to have to tell people either. It's just, but there is rules for a reason, and know that it's for the best.
I'm still not hearing any consensus to change.
No, I don't think you are.
Okay, I'm good. I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss anything. So, okay, staff got their feedback?
Did, yes.
I mean, it was definitely worth having a discussion. I mean, we wouldn't have had this discussion if the reason why it came forward wasn't a special case. I said it at the meeting, it's a great example of how it should be done, if it could be done, and it's just a concern if it can. So, obviously it can, it's just whether cities have the will to deal with the ones that don't, and I think that's where the problem lies. Anything else anyone want to add? Otherwise, this is the end of our joint work meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the planning commission.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. So,
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for being here.
Say, Jack, I'd like to put something out there. I think it'd be a good idea, maybe once every quarter or every 4 or 5 months, get together with the planning commission. I mean, just to go through things like this. I mean, I learned a lot today, a lot of information that, some of us don't go to the planning commission meetings or watch it on TV, but it'd be good to set something up like this,
Yeah, this is the first joint meeting we've had since COVID. We did have one
We had one
pre-COVID.
Right
prior to
before
COVID
But
about elevage.
I think it's good to have at least one annually.
One a quarter
so-
or something, I don't know,
it also depends
So-
on what's on the docket.
Yeah, correct, yeah,
Might warrant more of that.
yeah.
And so what I recommend too is, we have elevage that will be coming in eventually here. And with that, I would recommend that Planning Commission and City Council have a work session with that, just kind of hammer out some of the planned unit development requirements and make sure everybody's on the same page with it as well.
Well, that's like the apartment building too. I heard they wanna do a third apartment building. I mean, that'd be a good one too, and if they get around to that point, so.
Well, and I can think back to a number of different things over the last decade where it went before planning and zoning, it went to city council, it went back to planning and zoning.
Yeah.
Went back to city council.
And then back to city council again where, you know, that could be, a lot of those redundancies could be.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the biggest change, well, not biggest, the biggest improvement in the way we're doing things is having the concept plan come in first and have that.
Yeah.
Because that saves everyone, particularly developers, a lot of hassle, so.
Yeah, and, Jack, you think we could invest in a couple more microphones?
I think so.
So everybody's voice can get recorded and be clear?
Yeah, we make that request every time we have a joint
Yeah.
work meeting.
Yeah.
Don't we have some of that, COVID money sitting out there somewhere?
Well, to be fair for this week.
Yeah.
And that and in the center.
And had anybody had more discussion with it.
Okay, good. Well,
Thank you,
thanks
guys.
again.
You didn't say a word.
So,
Laryngitis.
as planning files out, our next agenda item is the city capital facilities plans.
Thank you, Steve. The city currently has a capital improvement program for parks, major equipment replacement, and streets, but has not addressed municipal buildings with a scheduled plan for upgrades and/or replacements. As the city continues to grow, certain facilities will have to be updated or constructed to meet the demands for additional services. The purpose of a capital facilities plan is to provide adequate public facilities to serve existing and new development and ensure that these facilities will be in place to meet the needs and as development occurs. In response to informal discussions that have occurred over the past several years regarding the need for the replacement facility for Fire Station 2 and other capital projects, staff has recommended that an East Bethel capital facility plan be prepared with the initial focus being on the need to replace Fire Station 2 located at 2375 221st Avenue. To meet the demands for fire and emergency service and address the inadequate space at Fire Station 2, staff is recommending that a forecast of the needs for Station 2 and justification for a proposed new fire station be prepared. Analysis of sites for proposed locations be completed. A finance plan and cost estimates of this proposed capital facility be prepared and sources of funding identified. And these findings be presented to City Council for review and direction for moving forward on this matter. In addition to considering a replacement for Fire Station 2, other immediate concerns are the need to discuss facility assessments for Fire Station 3 addition, Public Works building upgrades and additions, City Hall upgrades, and ice arena improvements. The city utility projects would be a separate component of the capital facilities plan and could include water storage facilities for the area north of 237th Avenue along Highway 65. Utility extensions in the Highway 65 corridor between 181st Avenue and Viking Boulevard and 205th Avenue and 221st Avenue, and broadband and internet projects. The above list is not in any order of priority, and those projects that are an enterprise fund or receive grant monies could be done simultaneous with other projects funded from a city general fund. Proposals for Fire Station 2 would also deal with some of the needs for improvements and additional space for the Public Works building. Also, any proposals for Fire Station 2 would be coordinated with the Anoka County Sheriff's Department to incorporate their plans, if any, for a northern Anoka County Sheriff's Department substation. Attached are city-owned properties within the service area for Fire Station 2 for discussion of possible locations of this facility. I just want to briefly go over these to show what city property we have that could possibly be used for a new fire station for Fire Station 2. What we have here, here's Fire Station 2. Here's 3 city-owned properties that were kind of within that service area. There's city-owned property in Booster West Park, next to the post office and next to the ice arena. If we look at the current dimensions for the Fire Station 1 building, It's about 10,000 square feet and has about 100 feet setbacks for parking and access on 3 sides, 25 on one side, just to meet the setbacks for wetlands. The first site we looked at was the property that the city owns north of the ice arena. It's 14 acres. A fire station would require at least 3 acres, maybe a little bit more if you wanted to account for expansion. This black box is the size of the footprint of the existing Fire Station 1 building. The city owns this property, however, this property is still up to be decided on how it's to be developed, for it's to be a campus for city facilities, a park, whatever. The drawback to this site is access. You would have to cross Highway 65, going up to 209th Avenue without a signalized intersection. If you want a signalized intersection, you'd have to go all the way up to 213th. The other city-owned property within this area is the front portion of Booster West Park. There's adequate room to get a fire station in there. The only issue with that is it kind of really restricts the use of the park for other city-type functions. And the third city-owned property, the city owns approximately 11 acres. This is the post office, just east and southeast of the post office on either side of 214th Avenue, fronting Davenport Street. There's 2 sites here. Fire station can be constructed on either side, or potentially 214th Avenue could be rerouted and this combined into one site. This site would have to have some geotechnical work done on it to ensure that it is not going to be too expensive to build on. The advantage to this site is the number of acres that are available, plus it has almost immediate access to Highway 65 with a signalized intersection on Sims Road. There are several potential private properties that would be suitable. Some are available. We won't list those individually because we're not having any discussion on any selection of them. But I just wanted to go over these 3 city-owned sites and get direction from City Council on how to proceed with capital facilities planning for a fire department. Because if we start today, it would be probably 3 years before we'd ever get to construction. Fire Station 2 has very limited space inside. It has 3 bays and there's no storage. You've seen a picture of the cramped spaces in there between the trucks and the working desk. And again, as we grow, it's going to be imperative that we try to look at a location that's closer to Highway 65 and could potentially give better service to the northern and the western part of the city.
You're not thinking of closing to 100%, are you?
No, we would build a new one, and then 2 then would be used to upgrade the needs for space for the Public Works building. This one would be built relatively close to 2, within a mile, so it'd still be within the service area that we currently have for 2. But then that would help us address some of our space needs for Public Works, which we don't have enough room now to store our equipment inside in the winter. It lacks a wash bay. Also, too, if we build a new fire station, we'd probably want to design some space in there for the sheriff's department. That way we could get them out of the Public Works building. And again, the county had mentioned at one time before that they may be looking at a North Anoka County substation. If they do, to me, we'd be the prime location. We'd like to explore that possibility with them to see if there's still any interest on their part, and that would serve East Bethel, St. Francis, Oak Grove, Ham Lake, and Now Then, along with Linwood and Bethel. So there may be some potential. I'm not really encouraged with that, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't contact them to see what their plans were for that type of facility. At a minimum, we want to design some space in a new fire station for use of the East Bethel substation from that facility.
And they would maybe potentially share in the cost.
Well, and if they did that, then they'd probably charge us back on our contract though, because they currently get that, we charge them nothing for use of their substation, use of our public works building.
Jack, you state that there's we don't have a building replacement fund right now?
We have a building replacement fund, but we don't have a capital improvements plan for it.
So why doesn't that fall into the building replacement fund?
It should, but we've never had one. That's what I'm advocating.
The fund?
No, the plan for use of the fund. We have a fund called Building and Capital Improvements.
Right.
And we allocate $50,000 a year from the general fund into that account.
Right.
So we have the fund, but we don't have any specific plans for how we're gonna use that or what city buildings are gonna be up for improvements. You know, we need to start analyzing roofs on some of these buildings, so we'll be able to plan more efficiently how we're gonna use those funds and if we have adequate funding to address those.
I mean, we did used to have a plan, because we had a committee at one time. And I know we had something written down, because I'm trying to think how, because we, and this is not the first time we talked about Station Two.
Yeah.
Because that was actually one of our things we focused on, 15 years ago was Station Two. And that's why we kind of had that plan. So it's not that we haven't had a plan, we just haven't had anything recent or written.
Yeah, I haven't, I've never seen one.
Because it was before,
Yeah.
I mean, Doug Sell was on it, Artie was on it, Dan Barry was on a committee, I was on a committee. I think there's one other staffer was on a committee. And we met for a
Yeah.
while, we met periodically for a while, but we were doing, when we did one of the upgrades to City Hall.
Yeah.
That was part of it, so. So we've had that kind of structure, you just want something more formal now, so.
Well, I think it'd be kind of designed along the lines of our capital improvement plans for roads, streets, and parks, which we identify projects and costs and priorities. But the thing with the thing with these type of projects, though, if you want to do it, you got to start looking about 3 years ahead.
Well, and to be honest, there's no way we're gonna get a building fund big enough to build a fire station.
No.
That's gonna have to be bonded.
It is, and these projects typically do have to be bonded.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way we're gonna raise $5 million through a fund. It'll take forever to build that fund up, so.
Does the fire chief have a preference on where he'd like the fire station to be, or a
He would
recommendation?
He would be part of this discussion. These aren't to actually locate sites, it's just to show you what we've looked at. But he would definitely be one of the lead people in the search for property and to come up with some of the needs for fire station.
Because it's not,
too.
it's not necessarily where the station is, it's also where the firefighters live.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially for like, if we use the ice arena as example, I don't know if we got more than a couple firefighters are within 3 miles of there. Everyone's farther away, because everyone has to go to the station first and then they go out. So technically, you're almost better having the station closer where firefighters live, because they can get on a truck faster.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things to consider, but.
Yeah, that's one, I think the only problem with that is firefighters
Come and
leave
go.
and go, so. But it is a consideration, sometimes you have more that live on, I think now we had more that lived on the west side of Highway 65, at least those at Station 1. That's why the issue came up when we did the intersection improvements at Highway 65 and Viking Boulevard, was just gonna impede their getting to the station as quickly.
Yeah, the west side of 65 along Polk Avenue may be a better spot for a fire station.
And it could be, what I'm just pointing out is, these are city properties that we own, so, if we're looking to do something where you don't have to incur a great amount of money to purchase a site, but some of the private properties are probably better locations.
Well, all of any of these, I'd only consider a post office site. I don't wanna take property away from Booster,
No.
and I think the property next to the ice arena has a better use for it. So,
Actually, that spot on Booster's always been planned to be a fire station.
Has it
Like
really?
40
Yeah.
years.
Really?
It's always been that way. But I
Yeah.
agree, there's,
Like
that's
there's
what
better
that's what you
usage.
gotta weigh. I mean, you know,
well,
is there better use for that property, so.
and it's 11 acres. There's room to expand it in the future. There's
There's
more
other things may
room.
come in there.
It's,
So Jack, how you propose doing this?
What I propose to do is to create a capital improvements plan, again, that would mirror what our street and parks plan are. It would list projects, it would list priorities, and it would list cost. And once we had that done, then we would have to go into the detail to try to determine the needs for each one of them, because there'll have to be architectural services retained to develop specs and actually take a look at what our needs are to help design the project. So I would like to start out with something that's gonna be similar to what we're currently doing with our other capital improvement stuff, except have it memorialized in a spreadsheet so we can take a look at it and kind of base some of our decisions going forward off those projects.
So it seems like we're kind of skipping over the plan, going right to trying to find options for a fire station. I mean, is the plan gonna look at the city in terms of all our facilities and do an assessment and?
That's one thing that we can do too, and Tim and I have talked about that. I got a capital facility, it's not a capital facilities plan, it's some drawings of improvements for the city of Wyoming. But that would be the other option, you know, maybe that's the first step we need to take, is just do an overall capital facilities plan for what the city's needs are for these types of buildings and services. So you got this, that, you know, you have a report, we'd have to retain probably a consultant to do some of it, but I think we could gather a lot of the information for them. But my first concern is to see if we want to start looking at what our options are for Fire Station 2. Because that addresses several needs. It addresses some public works needs, it addresses Fire Station 2 needs.
Well, I think we need that needs analysis. I mean, why do we need it? You know, why do you, I mean, anecdotally, we've had some discussions, but to actually have a document showing that what the needs are.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the whole process of selling this, because like you say, some of this is gonna have to be bonded. So we need a real justification on why they're needed, and that would be part of that
And
assessment.
that needs analysis may
Yeah.
come up with, we don't need to upgrade a fire station right now.
It
so.
could be.
Any more thoughts?
Needs analysis.
Who does a needs analysis? Do we hire somebody, or is that internal, or? How does that work?
I think we do this internal to
Yeah.
start with.
Yeah, we would do the basic one internally and come up with a report, and then we could see then what consultant services we may or may not need.
For design and whatever.
I mean, it's all part of, now it comes back to me, I think we called it a space assessment work group. It was before we expanded all the offices. You know,
Mm-hmm.
The City Hall used to be like half that size. And that's how we started, with the space analysis, and we did a space analysis for City Hall, how many employees we had, what our needs were, and that justified making the expansion of City Hall, because we added up the garages, I think your offices, all the
All those
offices up there were
the
added.
three front ones.
Yeah, so we did a space assessment, so So that's what I'm thinking. I mean, and the fire station was part of it, although we just, it was one of those things we were gonna do, we just never did, but, you know, you can do the same thing, you know, we're gonna talk about the arena for a couple minutes. You know, what are the needs there, and how does it fit, and then how do you fund it, you know? We can talk about the maintenance facility, we can talk about, you know, any of our facilities that, especially if they're getting older, what do we do about it? And that's kind of how the committee was meant to be standing, obviously it didn't stood, so, but, you know, I see a need for it, but I also don't wanna like jump right into, and skip all that step and go right into the fire station analysis too. I mean, it's the one I think it's the most obvious, but I agree with that, but. So you're looking to do this on a staff level?
Yes.
Okay. Not as a committee?
I would recommend that the staff prepare a report. If you want to appoint a committee to look at it, or just present it totally to the city council, and let the city council be the committee, however you want to do that.
Any thoughts?
I guess we could probably look at it as a city council, and if it needs more detail, you can decide to appoint a committee of staff and council members and.
Maybe create the framework for it first, rather than going through all the detail.
Okay.
I think we'd all have a better understanding of what we're trying to do, so. Any other thoughts?
No, that sounds like a good first step.
Okay. And we'll get an update on the ice arena discussions?
Thank you. First of all, Councilman Harrington and I met with the St. Francis Youth Hockey Association last Thursday afternoon to discuss concerns with the ice arena involving upgrades, maintenance, cleanliness of the arena. We had a good meeting. I think we all agreed on some of the major upgrades that need to be considered. Those essentially were, the two top ones were the renovation of the bathrooms and the renovation of the lobby and expansion of the lobby area. By removing the wall and extending that space into what's now used as a little storage room and the office space for Gibson management. I don't know how much, if you want to go into the background of this, I think we're all pretty well familiar with the background, but essentially in the past 3 months, the city has received several complaints regarding the cleanliness of the facility, communication concerning scheduling with Gibson Management Company, concession operations, and attention to daily maintenance items. These items have been presented back to Gibson Management Company by the city staff, but these matters have not been entirely resolved at this time. Due to these complaints, city council members have requested and been given individual tours of the arena. As a result of their inspection of the facility, they have directed staff to examine ways to correct these problems, including but not limited to consideration of contract modifications and proposals for a different management plan. Staff has met with the primary users of the facility, St. Francis High School and the St. Francis Youth Hockey Association, to discuss these concerns. We've heard their complaints, and we have those on list to address them, especially those ongoing maintenance activities. Also, we're talking about improvements, which there have been improvements to the facility over the past 4 years, notably air exchangers to reduce a mold problem in one of the locker rooms, replacement of the exterior doors on the building, pouring of a new sidewalk, replacement of the entrance doors on the building, and replacement of the dasher boards within the rink. Currently, the biggest item of everyone's concern is the renovation of the restrooms. Those restrooms were opened in 1994. The fixtures in there were put in used, so it's definitely outdated. In order to protect the concrete floor and people's skates, it's covered with sectional rubber mats that don't interlock which makes it very difficult to maintain and keep clean. I think everybody agrees that that's the first priority. The city has actually, is in the process of obtaining an estimated cost for the renovation of both of those. We hope to get those back very soon. As far as looking at the issues going forward, the general options for correcting and preventing the reoccurrence of this problem could include, but are not limited to, retain the existing contract in place with a final notice to Gibson Management that any unmet performance obligation would result in termination of their contract. Renegotiate the existing contract with Gibson Management regarding staffing and transference of certain maintenance duties, along with a reduction in fees. Lease of the facility to St. Francis Youth Hockey Association for ice event activities. This was presented to them, and they did express an interest in looking at some numbers on that. I'm not sure how far that would go, but we will be in the process of presenting them with something here shortly so they can have that for consideration. They did say that they had some investors that might even be interested in buying the building. We've had some of these discussions before. They never did go through, but that might be another option too. We could transfer the operation and management of the facility directly to the city. We could terminate the contract with GMC and solicit requests for proposals for a similar management agreement with a private contractor, or as stated previously, we could consider a sale of the facility. The major issue with leasing the building out is attracting a lessee to operate the facility and protecting the city's investment in the facility and establishing responsibilities for maintenance of the equipment. These are things that will be discussed if St. Francis Youth Hockey Association is interested in pursuing this. Transferring the management as a city function, while a consideration, could create circumstances that have the potential to expand well beyond its purpose and create an additional level of management and expense. Should this be an option, the structure of the management arrangement needs to be carefully prepared to minimize the use of city staff and maximize the use of part-time help and vendors. The city did operate the arena from its opening until 2006, at which time it's been run by a private management group. I think when you go back and look at the cost of the city's operation of it, it was much more expensive to run than the contract price is now. The big advantage of the city running the facility would be our direct hourly and daily control of the facility. The drawbacks would probably be one of the more expensive options to consider. The worst case scenario would be the sale of the building and the property to someone other than the St. Francis group. This would remove the city from the arena operations business and generate funds for other purpose. It would also place this property on the tax rolls if it were sold to a non-tax exempt entity. Should the sale of the facility be considered as an option for discussion, we would need as a minimum to consider the impact of closing the facility as an ice arena public event site. A sale would have to be timed to allow current users to find other facilities, and we would have to consider the land use implications to adjacent city properties. The building and property have an estimated tax market valuation of $1,617,000. The arena building is approximately 34,000 square feet, and the two parcels that comprise the property are 6.29 acres. This property is encumbered by a MnDOT park and ride agreement that comprises 1 acre of the site and an 11/100 acre cell tower site that is in the 8th year of a 25-year lease to American Towers. Staff is presenting this information to City Council as a discussion item and to discuss some of the options moving forward as to what we want to approach as the management concept for the arena.
Questions?
I don't have one with the contract right now. One other thing that they brought up, Jack, that you didn't mention was that building needs a cleanup and paint, and it would probably help immensely besides the bathrooms and the front lobby.
Well, the cleanup and paint will probably go as far as anything. That would be the
But I mean, it make it
biggest
look a
improvement for
lot
the
better
business.
than it is now.
If you whitewashed that whole
Yeah.
thing and just cleaned it up and brightened it up, it would
Yeah,
go
'cause,
a long way.
well, all 7 of us last Thursday agreed that a good cleanup and paint would be
They're
a good
never
start.
maintain that. I don't know what, at all. I was really appalled at how dirty it was, and I was horribly appalled at that bathroom, that if it's been like that since the fall, that's ridiculous.
Oh, the back bathroom, the
Yeah.
locker room bathroom, that bathroom was,
That one
oh,
that had the crap all over
Yeah,
it?
that's-
yeah.
How can they just leave that for that long? I mean, shoot, pay me, I'll go in there and clean it up. You don't leave poop
No.
laying around. You don't. I don't care how disgusting it is. Clean it up. I mean,
That's what they're getting paid for.
exactly. It's ridiculous. But I think we should just say they're not following their contract and put it out for another request for bid. I don't wanna lose the ice arena. I think the city needs it. I think the school district needs it. And if we could get it cleaned up, whether we take it out of the money that we pay Gibson Management to pay somebody else to do it, to paint it and clean it up, so be it. And find
But-
another company that's willing to come in and take care of it.
But you gotta keep in mind also, don't necessarily disagree, but you gotta keep in mind is, Gibson's our contractor. This is our facility.
But they're not.
City
doing it
staff,
well.
no, city staff has been well aware of these issues for a long time. I mean, years, many years. So it's not enough just to just pin everything on our contractor because, the fact that the bathroom doesn't have hot water has nothing to do with Gibson's contract. This is our building, it's our responsibility, and we've known about it, and we didn't do anything about it. It's a shame on us.
Right.
So, and where I'm getting at with this is what we need before we go anywhere and start just doing things haphazard is get together. I mean, we've met with these different entities, get a list together. And I said it, we met with the AD for St. Francis, I said it with the youth hockey too. Get a list together, what's the wants, what are the needs, and let's sit down and figure out how to do this, and then we'll figure out costs and come up with priorities. But just to say, oh, we got bids, we're gonna do the bathrooms right now, it's like, that's haphazard, we gotta do this right. And then when we get that list, we'll look at that. Cleaning the rafters is something hasn't been done since city operated it. But we've known about it, haven't done anything about it, we haven't pushed them to do it. Same thing in painting, I mean, these are all things that we've known about. Some of the things that Gibson should have done and fixed, we'll address that, but some of the things are they're on our knee, we did these things, or didn't do these things, so. But we gotta find out what all the issues are first, and do this organized, and get it done right, otherwise it's just gonna be.
I think
Piecemeal.
everybody's top list though, from everybody.
And
that we
everyone's
talked
got
about
different
is-
priorities, so let's know what everyone's priorities are, and then decide how we're gonna address these
Yeah,
things. So,
because the youth hockey, they gave us a list last Thursday.
Did it,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, that's
But
a
I mean,
start,
but-
that's a start.
right, it's
So-
a start, but we need to compile
Yeah,
all this.
Yeah,
So when council starts deciding
Yeah.
what we're gonna do is, okay, where's all the priorities?
Right.
And have a plan for this, so. And don't be too quick to dismiss Gibson because for 8 years, they've been the only game in town.
Here's the thing about that. We have gone out for bids on this twice. Both times, we have received no qualified or no proposals that we could afford.
Right.
If somebody is qualified, they want all these things totally upgraded before they want to come in the building.
Well, we
And-
kinda had that discussion, when you've got a facility that's not up to par, people tend not to take care of it. They tend not to care that their bags hit the wall and pucks are hitting everywhere and things are broken. They don't care. If you give them a facility that's new or clean or worthwhile, I think people take better care of things. I mean, that's just human nature.
I'll agree to the point until you be present when there's adolescent
Men,
hockey
yes,
boys.
I
and
understand that. I understand that, but,
Sticks and pucks and
Yeah.
everything.
well, but if you gave them a clean facility or a bathroom that worked, or
Well,
more
that,
than
yeah,
one.
that's the basics.
Yeah, that's the basics that I said I would expect if I was using any facility for anything. I would expect my bathrooms to work, I'd have hot water, and it would be clean, beyond anything else.
Right.
So
But I
some
think-
of it's us and some of it's Gibson, and we can tackle the big stuff.
Let's,
We have to.
can staff compile this list, and put a document together and get it to council so we have a
I
better
have
understanding
it
what's going
already
on?
compiled, it's ready to ship
Okay.
out. And I would also propose maybe that we have Mr. Gibson come to our next work meeting.
Do what?
Have Mr. Gibson come to our next work meeting
For the purpose of?
to impress upon him the gravity of this situation and to let him know that, you know, if there's really.
Let's get a better understanding of what we're dealing with, so let's get a list and, you know, so far all we have are complaints and hearsay and everything else. Get something together, here's the things we can focus on, and then we'll have something to talk to Gibson about, because right now, I don't know what benefit it'll be to do this at a council level, when you haven't even met with them at a staff level yet, so. But Unless council wants him here.
No, we can put it off.
I think we can put out there too that the other ice arenas in the area are having problems too. Isani has money problems, and that's a privately funded
There is at the
facility.
ice arena I know about that isn't a challenge to operate,
Yep.
so.
Mora seems to do pretty well, but they've got facility issues too. But running it, they do pretty well.
Okay. Anything else on the arena? The fundraiser's this weekend, right? So-
Yep.
Okay.
She's got a goal. Oh, you look pretty good on TV too, by the way.
That's open to the public.
That was.
Yeah.
That was
I
in
wa-
Yeah, I
town
think
too?
they'll- I
Did
think
you
they'll
get
try
I was
sideswiped?
amazed, I
It's
was
open to
amazed
public.
how
Yeah.
well it turned
Yeah,
out.
because they're looking for donations
Yeah.
too from the public and everything, so.
I was just thinking
Yeah.
about running by there.
Friday from 5 to 10, I think, and then Saturdays in the morning till
Yeah, it's like from 8
till 10 in the at
10
night,
at
and then
night.
And they got
Sunday
open
morning,
skate
Sunday
and
afternoon.
a bunch of stuff.
Okay,
She has a goal of 10 grand.
anything else? Motion to adjourn.
Make motion.
Second.
Motion made second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Our work meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.